Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connection so you can have a thriving marriage. Today, our topic is what to say when you're hit below the belt in conflict. All right. So if you've been married for, 10 minutes, you might have noticed some strengths, weaknesses, and maybe even some vulnerable places in your spouse. When we are in the early stages of our marriage, we tend to hold those places very sacred. Over time, what happens is if we've not been managing our own emotions and we, are going down the wrong path, we start using those same places as weapons against those we say we love most. So we want to talk about that today and what that looks like, what to say in that moment, because that's a really hard thing to get past for many of us. So hopefully you'll walk away with some tips on how to recover from those tough spots. So Nina, I don't know about you, but I've been on both sides of this thing and I'm not proud of it, but it happens. What are your thoughts around when we get into the ring and we go for the jugular?
Yeah. There used to be, well, and there still are, there's boxing with rules and there's, street fighting, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then there's just the awareness of what is our flesh, what's evil and what's holy. And holy is not going to be something that intentionally tries to injure. And sometimes we do that out of our own pain. Sometimes we're in full on rebellion. Sometimes it's just absolute evil. We're just trying to injure the other person. I'm thankful because if I'm like that, I don't really have an awareness of it, and that's not a big thing for me. And I'm thankful for that. Because gosh, can you imagine? And I've had moments where I've wanted to get even, but I haven't acted on them. And I've had people in my life that, they do. And the thinking behind it is, let's see how they like it. There's this animosity, this revenge kind of vengeance attitude that comes along with it. I'm going to hurt you back, and that I have never seen that look like anything good. We're under the influence of evil, I believe, when we're acting in that. And I'm not saying I have my own special version of evil that I get influenced by. But vengeance isn't usually a thing that I'm drawn to, but I see it happen, and it is real for people. We get human beings are tempted with all sorts of stuff. And so that is a real temptation for people, is to get even or to hit back, to seriously injure someone because they've been injured. And it never works. It's a thing that needs to go in relationships.
Absolutely. And sometimes this does happen unintentionally. I do want to put that out there. Sometimes we step on each other's toes and we're unaware, but that's not what we're really talking about today. We're really talking about the intentional harm that we do in our relationships, because, this is about growing up. This is about being honest, and we have to be able to admit to ourselves, yeah, I've done that, and then know how to respond. Okay, so what we want you to walk away with today is the what to say. When you have been on the receiving end of this type of behavior, and if you don't do this well, you can really injure the other person equally, which causes more harm and causes things to just spiral down. and we don't want that. So let's get into some tips to how to turn this around. All right. So I have someone that is really close to me that kind of went through this. And, this was a period of time when her and her spouse were trying to have kids, and they had a couple of miscarriages in the process. And that's a hard thing to go through. It's a very personal thing to go through. And it's something you don't necessarily want everybody to know about. Well, it ended up being that she shared it with someone, and then that person shared it with someone else, and then it got back to her, and she was, of course, devastated by that.
Oof.
Yeah, right? It's
Yeah.
tough. And so this wasn't necessarily her spouse that caused the harm, but it was someone she trusted. And so, um, I want to talk about how, she could have handled it, because I'm not really sure what she said or what she did, but I do know she was very hurt. And maybe that person didn't do it with the intent to harm, and maybe they thought it was okay, but her heart was really broken over it. So curious as to what she could have said to her friend. What would be the right thing to say
Mm.
in that situation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're absolutely right that it needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it is a friend, like that kind of thing needs to be talked about, because otherwise it's just going to be between them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would start with a question. And that question would be, hey, so I shared this thing with you, and so came back to me and said they knew about it and that you told them. So can you help me understand what happened there? And that opens the door. Hopefully the friend will say, you know what? I totally screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even thinking. I thought you'd already told them, or I figured you would because I know you guys are close or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't have done it. I am so sorry. I overstepped, like grovel time, right? But they may not do that. And that lets you know exactly how well you know this person and how well they know you. And that gives you some insight into what you actually have as a relationship in terms of how they respond to any kind of corrective feedback. Because if they go, well, I figured you would have told them, like you didn't tell them that, like, what's that about? Or, maybe they're defensive. Well, yeah, so, whatever. And then it's I felt A because this happened. And then now it makes me question, so I felt betrayed by you.
Mm-hmm.
I told you that in confidence in the middle of a moment that was like, I'm naked and afraid and devastated. And I told you this. And you took that, which I trusted you with, and you shared it with somebody else that I had no intentions of telling. And now it makes me question our relationship. And you let that sit, because you have to be truthful in the relationship. If this is an adult you're dealing with, they will own it and they will apologize like nobody's business. They will be all over it. You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? I won't do it again. And then you receive that and you're like, yes, I forgive you. And then you think twice before you tell them something
Right.
else, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it might be a while before you tell them something else,
Mm-hmm.
but you let them earn their trust back, right? Now, if they respond defensively, yeah, you know what you're dealing with. That's not somebody you can trust. They've damaged trust, and then they've been offended that you've looked at that differently. Now, there's an attitude too, and this is one that I have to watch personally, because well, I do and I don't. I mean, I don't share. It's not my story to tell, right? So that's a thing. If it happens
Mm-hmm.
in my yard, it's my story to tell. And I can
Right.
talk about my perception of it, but I can't talk about the other person involved and what they went through. And I want to make sure that, like, you and I are on the air, I do a lot of radio stuff. write things, you have to protect other people's experiences when you're talking about them, right? So if she was talking to her friend, she would probably leave out how horrible this was for her husband, right?
Yeah.
That would be protective. She wouldn't
Mhm.
share his, upside down or whatever there. She would share
Mhm.
her experience, right?
Mhm.
And the reason that we do this is because people go share things. Like her friend went off and betrayed her. And
Mhm.
okay, so now she's betrayed her husband too, if that, you see what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
we have to know what's in our yard and what's not.
That's good.
And on top of that, whose story is it to tell? I had a friend's kid reach out to me when their mom uh, discovered her dad's affair.
Mhm.
And I already knew, but their kid reaches out to me and says, "Hey, can't really tell you what's going on, but my mom needs extra love right now."
Wow.
And I already knew about it, but I thought, what a wise 17-year-old this is, to say, "Hey, my family's going through a thing. I'm not going to betray anybody by telling you what it is, but my mom needs help and support." And so I didn't go to my friend and say, "Hey, your 17-year-old reached out to me and said, hey, you're messed up." I didn't do that. I just invited her for coffee. We went, and of course she told me more, and she just needed more contact. That was it. But is whose story is it? If it's not
Right.
your story to tell, you shouldn't be telling it. And if somebody tells a story about you that's not theirs to tell, then you have to confront that. You have to deal with it. Otherwise, you're in a relationship that now has masks, and
Mm.
you've been betrayed. You have to address that. The other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that people know when we're telling them something in confidence.
Yeah.
Um, hopefully, I think honestly, once you're in a relationship with somebody for a long enough time, you would think,
Right.
you would think, hey, this is just between me and you. But it's still wise on our part to just say, hey, I'm letting you know this. This is in
Mhm.
confidence.
Mhm.
But the other attitude that I started on this, I kind of wandered off from it. But one of the things that I personally believe is that whatever happens to me in my life is not my own. Um,
Mm.
God's given me a platform to share and communicate and use my life, and the stuff I learn about Jesus to help others that are struggling, right? That's a spot that I sit in. Not everybody has that spot in a big space, but they have it in
Mhm.
smalls, right?
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, I still want to have control of my story to tell. So if I had a friend, I would, and most of my friends know that I'm pretty much an open book most of the time, but I have a handful of people that it's like, this is what's going on. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I need to talk about it with someone. I need somebody to walk with me for a while before I, start speaking about this thing in my life, right? Um,
That's
and
good.
people do that. Yeah, but I'm real clear about what those boundaries are and all of that. And at the same time, sometimes I struggle with people who want to keep stuff to themselves after, 15 years later, after they've supposedly healed from it. It's like, well, why do you think you went through that? You know, okay, you're still not healed. Maybe like, well, gosh, let's do that because somebody's missing a blessing from you. That wasn't wasteful suffering. So I have a little bit different attitude around it.
Mhm.
Um, but even with that, it's not my place to push somebody to share stuff when they're not ready. You have to be on the other side of injury. You have to have some healing before you start talking about what's going on in your life in a way that's designed to influence other people. And when people tell you things that are close to their hearts, we are walking on sacred, holy ground when somebody
Mhm.
invites you into pain. And that needs to be held so, so close.
This is such rich wisdom. And the question in my head is, Why is this intuitive for some people and not others, like the 17-year-old? Why? What do you think needs to happen in homes that isn't happening, where
Mhm.
some of this stuff just, isn't handled with that, sacredness that you're speaking about?
Yeah, so you're tapping into a topic that's really, really important. It's very well researched. Dr. Brené Brown has a lot of stuff around this. It's about trust. So
Mm,
in a lot of cultures, ours, Western culture especially, and maybe in other cultures, you get a tidbit of gossip. And it's like, hey, let me tell you, have you heard? And so you feel this rush of dopamine. You get this juicy thing you're going to share, and you're going to be important for a minute. It's like the seventh grade girl who knows the scoop on so-and-so's, whatever. And for a moment, you feel really important. Well, what you don't know is that you just damaged trust with everybody you gossiped to.
mhm,
Because underlying, and even if they're eager to hear this tidbit, this morsel of juiciness, slander of somebody else, even if it's true, now they're wondering, and this is what the research shows, are you also talking about me?
mhm,
And guess what? They probably are.
mhm,
So there's this culture where we feel a little bit of a rush when we gossip or slander about somebody else, when we share things. We feel important because we know something somebody else doesn't. And then we
mm,
can put somebody else down. We can feel superior because they don't know this thing.
mhm.
And you see, I hate this. Christians do this. Well, we just need to pray for Sarah and Dave. Their marriage is so struggling, and I don't want to talk out of turn. Well, you already have.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even your prayer request to make there. You're doing this in a group of people who don't even know. Stop it. Like, God doesn't need, I have some friends that are close to me that are struggling. Can we just, God knows their names. Like, can we just pray for them? Like, seriously, y'all. But there's a culture that exists. And so when people start telling us other people's stories, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I don't think I should know about this.
Mhm.
I think I'm
Yeah.
outside of this loop, and I would feel really uncomfortable if they knew that I knew. So I don't think that's your story to tell. And I don't mean to be rude here, but I'm not going to listen to it. Can we change the subject? Like that. Yeah. That direct, that. Yeah. And it's awkward, and people get mad at you for calling them up to a higher level of being.
Mhm.
But I'm not going to be on the receiving end of gossip. And then I've just realized, I've just learned something about that person that's trying to share something juicy with me. I don't trust you anymore either. So, and I know that this is how they get their social street cred, is through betraying other people. That is part of culture. That happens. Why
Mhm.
we love TV is why we like reality TV and the horrible garbage that happens there.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, gross. That's just evil. It's like, let me shake this off. And we don't want to repay evil with evil. That's that betrayal thing you were talking about earlier. So,
So it's really cultural. A lot of it is what we're allowing our eyes and our ears to have access to. Um, but I do think it's important to emphasize it also in the home and in our relationships, like what you just gave example to. I don't think that's done enough. Like, we hear that we're supposed to do that. We hear that at church. But I think when it comes time to do it, I think we all chicken out, quite honestly, because it's uncomfortable, right?
mhm,
And I think modeling it and being brave and having enough courage and having enough integrity really
mhm.
within yourself is the key to doing that well. Because a lot of times it's people that we do trust. A lot of times it's
Yeah.
the people that we are not expecting to gossip about so and so, and taking a
Mhm.
stand can be hard, um, but not impossible.
Well, and we need to be who we are, because that to
Yeah.
not say something we feel like, I've come out, I haven't always spoken up. I mean, for real.
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do with it. It felt awkward, and I didn't see anybody else doing it. Everybody just kind of, listens in. Some people ask questions, and other people just kind of, ignore the behavior. I didn't ever see anybody doing anything about that. But when you work in an industry like I was a human resources manager for years. And so there's levels of confidentiality around what employers can and can't do, around what employees can and can't say, and all those kinds of things. And then you do coaching for a living, and it's like you got to protect everybody. And we're working with married people, right? So
Yeah.
I tell the wife, I'm not going to tell you what your husband talks to me about. And if you're smart, you're not going to ask him. And I tell the husband the same thing. And the reason I do that is there has to be safety. There has to be that in a relationship. Otherwise, people feel betrayed and worried and whatever. And there's no place for that. But to not, like, I've been to some things where I felt like I needed a shower afterwards because I said nothing and people are gossiping. And it's like, this is sticking to me. And it was because I was doing nothing. We're condoning sin. And you don't have to be terrible about it. I mean, sometimes you have ramifications from it, but what's the alternative?
Right.
I think that's worse.
Yeah.
I think that's worse. If we're going to be God's people, which we are, we need to speak truth into those spaces, which can be gentle. Hey guys, I don't want to be the odd one out here. I know gossip and stuff is fun, or, talking about this is really interesting. I'm feeling uncomfortable hearing about this because I don't think this is my story to know about. If so-and-so knew that I knew, I think that would really hurt her. And so I'm not going to participate in this. Actually, I'd like us to change the topic of the conversation. So can we do that? And then you're going to have an awkward silence. Everybody's going to look at you and then you're going to say, so how about the Bengals? Like, Joanne, you got a new dog. Like, you're just going to transition. You're just going to help everybody get over it.
Yeah.
Do the thing. If it's being a leader, you've got to be, you're either a victim in a situation or you're a leader in a situation. And it is not good service to the people that aren't there. Like, and because think about that later, Joanne comes back to you and says, so I understand everybody was talking about me at Bunko the other night or at Bible study, and you were there for that, right? Yeah. How come you didn't stop it? How come you let them talk about that? Like, think about what happens when people find out that they're the topic of conversation, and they don't always, but a lot of times they do. And it doesn't have to be a crowd.
Yeah.
So, and you were there and you did nothing. Now I don't trust you either. And they shouldn't, because we betrayed them and ourselves.
I love it. I love it. It's so true. And it needs to be said because we're all accountable for what we allow ourselves to be exposed to, whether we are participants actively or passively. And if we know better, we should do better. So
I have groups of people that I do coaching with. When we do the marriage intensive, we have groups of wives and groups of husbands. And I cut people off in the middle of some of the details. I'm like, we don't need to know that part. That's disrespectful to your husband. That's dishonoring. Those details don't matter. Tell us about what you're feeling. Tell us about what's going on inside of you. And they're like, no, I want you to know this really horrible thing he did. Like, they don't say it that way, but they want to share these details that make him look terrible. I don't have any time for that. That is absolutely not useful to them. It's not useful to their spouse, and it is damaging to that marriage. It's a betrayal of trust. So, and I'm married, have been for like 32 years. And yet that is always at the forefront of any of the communication that I do here is, how do I talk about the real things that happen for me in my own marriage, my own relationships with my kids, in a way that protects them and yet is still honest and transparent about my own experience. And the thing that people have to understand is, just because one person has a bad experience doesn't mean that that's the state of the entire relationship.
Right.
The Bible tells us, one person says their thing and they sound right until you hear the other person. There's always multiple sides to something. So you can't get over on that other person's side. You got to stay in your own yard with this stuff and stay out of other people's. It's not your story to tell.
Yeah. And I also really love that you have the awareness around healing has to happen before we can talk about a thing, even if this is something that God intends to use to help someone else. Like in coaching, I'm sure you have context from your own situation, but you don't necessarily have to talk about it in a way that doesn't protect. That takes like healing, that takes maturity, that takes growth, that takes awareness. And I think sometimes that's in the way for many of us, where we're just either, like you said, excited to tell a story that isn't ours to tell, or we're overwhelmed by our own situation. We don't even know that it's okay just to be quiet for a little while until God moves us into a different space mentally around whatever that thing is. So yeah, I love that. And I know we've kind of, veered off a little bit with this, but what I really wanted our listeners to come away with is within the marriage. So if you're in your marriage and your spouse and you have been together for a while and, something comes at you about your habit of being late, or let's say you have like a problem with stuttering, or you struggled with that growing up and your spouse makes fun of you, and it's a sensitive area. Those type of things, when that happens, can be really, hurtful and devastating. And it makes you not want to, be open and vulnerable with
Right.
with your partner. So I'm curious, in those situations in particular, what to say if you're on the receiving end of that?
Ouch.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding.
Okay.
I mean, for real, that's I've taught all my kids to say this. Ouch.
Okay.
Dude, that's below the belt. You want to try that again?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't let that stuff go, or you do. Because, when you become healed, you don't take somebody's bad behavior upon you. So they can behave badly and you can go, wow. And then you can have an adult conversation. I don't mind talking about, how late I am consistently, but when you make fun of my stuttering around with that's not building relationship. It damages our relationship. It's affecting how I feel about you. I'd like that to never happen again. And you're real clear about it. But honestly, the more you go through listening and healing prayer, the more you become bulletproof, unoffendable in these spaces. You've healed from all this stuff. People can say whatever, it doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah.
But you can at the same time recognize it's not good for them to do that. And it's not good for the relationship. And you cannot have intimacy in a relationship, physical or relational, emotional, spiritual, when there's injurious behavior that's tolerated. That's not okay. And God's pretty clear about what's good and what's not good. Let's see, fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Like, that's it right there. Do those things, you'll be fine. Sounds easy. It's not. But yeah, so calling attention to it in a way that helps the other person and gives them the opportunity to apologize. Hey, I didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going that direction now. I think we need to take a break from the conversation, because it's not like you to speak meanly like that to me. That was cruel. I want to come back to this when we have a different space to interact in. You leave. Give them time to chew, think, come back and apologize, which, if somebody's growing, they'll own their stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sometimes this is done in a joking manner where, they don't think it's a big deal, but it's a really big deal for you. And something like ouch, I think, kind of really awakens, the other person to the damage and the injury, because we all come from different, environments. And so what's offensive to you might not be offensive to your spouse. But if it is a place that is sensitive, this ouch technique is definitely one to use. Okay, so lots of approaches here. We've talked about why people do this and the advantage that, it seems to bring, which is really, a lie, because you're really just breaking down trust for yourself and everybody else in the room. We've talked about how, the culture teaches us to use these things against each other, and how we should be aware of that, and how what we allow our eye gates and ear gates to have access to is so important. But aside from that, other things that you can do if you are on the receiving end of, something deeply painful, as, a vulnerable space being used against you in your marriage, or being shared with someone you didn't intend for it to be shared with. You have a lot of different things you can do. Ask a question. If, this is a place or a person that, you think might owe you an apology, ask a question. Ask them to help you understand what happened. Share your pain. Let it sit with them. They apologize, great. They have the opportunity to build trust back. If they respond defensively, then take that information and recognize that trust may not be possible in this relationship. Also, know what's in your yard. Know what's your story to tell. People sometimes forget what is their responsibility and not. And so if that's something that needs to be brought to their attention, bring that up. Make sure sometimes we have to let people know this is confidential information. I'd appreciate if it, stayed between the two of us. If you get to the point where you're ready to share, you see a ministry opportunity there, ask God if it's time. Make sure you've done healing work and walked with someone through that pain. And if not, there's inner listening and inner healing prayer that you can try. And we are very much about that here at Greater Impact. We offer that as part of our coaching. So if you're interested, definitely check out our website, greaterimpact.org, for more info about that. And yeah, so I think we can wrap up today's episode. We want you to do something with the information you have. And in addition to the inner healing prayer that I just spoke about, we have a free PDF that you can download called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells, available. And we also have more episodes on our channel on lots of other good topics. We hope you enjoyed today's topic, and we can't wait to see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.